October 13th, 2016. Guys, this is part 4 of the NIBIRU system. It's one of my favorite. But let me say this first. I've had a lot of people really freaking out about this. And I remember back in 2012 when I first started on YouTube, I was showing the impacts and timings of coronal mass ejections and the resulting earthquakes. And I had the same reaction then from many YouTube channels, even from different scientific groups. And eventually everyone has come around and they watch them now the same way that I do. We've seen hundreds of them in the last 4 years. The same thing has happened with a couple of different things, but right here with this Jupiter system being what the ancients called NIBIRU, I've never seen anything quite like this as far as reaction. Now, there's a couple reasons. One, I think the main one is so many people have survived with, as far as being popular on YouTube, by showing lens flares on 10-cent cameras on cell phones. Guys, if you don't see it with your naked eye and you believe someone says you can only see it with a 10-cent camera inside your cell phone, then think about this. When Operation Blue Beam happens, or when Satan is on this planet showing miracles, if you can be fooled by a lens flare and a 10-cent camera, you don't stand a chance. I think that's got a lot of them upset. But these are high-definition images of the solar wind coming from the sun, which is blacked out in the right, so that you have this high-definition image. Imagine the strength that you're seeing. This video has everything to do with that, because when these solar winds pass our planet, in each of the planets, it creates the magnetic field. Now, this pink area called the bow shock is how far the sun's solar winds reach out. You notice all the planets are there. Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, all the way down. You've got terminal shock, the heliopause. This image, infrared of our sun, double red wings, infrared imaging. This is the layout of Jupiter's magnetopause, the magnetotail, which goes all the way back 403 million miles to the orbit of Saturn. Think about that, 7 million out front, but because of the solar wind, it goes back that far. Now, what happens if the solar wind of Jupiter reverses? Remember, it is the second largest object in the solar system. Its magnetic field is 18,000 times larger than our planet. What happens if something causes this giant magnetic field to reverse? Would we see it on the inner planets? Could that be possible? It is possible, and we've seen it before. Could it become so strong as the second largest object in the solar system, as its magnetic field increased as we were going through a solar minimum? Could that happen? This animation with real images of Jupiter in the center and its moons, remember it has 67 total known objects orbiting it. What would happen to that with a prolonged change of solar wind direction? Could an event happen to where there's Jupiter there, next to inline is the asteroid belt? That's what we've been talking about. You've got 60-something objects orbiting around Jupiter. This is a graphic, but it shows the sun and it shows the Earth. The magnetic lines that connect both of them are connecting every planet in the solar system, in our solar system. They're not straight lines, and that's important to understand. We'll point that out a little further. Let's go back a few months to April of this year, April 22nd, 2016. I put the red dot over here just to simplify it, because the solar wind is coming from that direction. You see the arrows? The Earth is the black dot, guys. A lot of you have seen this before, but just if you haven't, this has happened twice, back in 2012. It happened this April 23rd of this year. Let's take a look at anyway, we got solar stream, just like you were seeing in the first of this video, those golden waves of energy. They're coming from the sun with the arrows. Now, as we get into the April the 23rd, something happens. This went down for 4 days because of it. The solar stream reversed. Check this out. We were watching it recorded. I've got a couple of videos of it. It's called the magnetopause reversal. I think if you type that in, you can find the full videos. But that happened. What caused solar wind of this to overcome the solar stream from the sun? What was behind our planet? It was the worst collapse of the magnetopoles I've ever seen, and all the energy was trapped inside that. Let's look at the planets on that day. Jupiter, the Earth and Mars and Saturn are on the bottom side of the sun. You see Venus at the top. You also have Mercury there. But the straight lines of magnetic connectivity, and each planet has them, you've seen it before, are not straight. Look at today's magnetopoles model. See how each line is curved? The red dot is Mars, the yellow dot is Earth. And these interplanetary magnetic field lines, or IMF lines, are not straight. So when you look at the image to the right as it's overlaid, as the Earth is to the right of Jupiter, the magnetic field lines from the sun and cross the Earth going towards Jupiter on that day, on the exact day of something that is unheard of, except one other time that I know of in the history of where we could record it with instruments. I'm sure it's happened before, and I think it happened for more than a few days about 12,000 years ago. We'll get into that. But here you've got Jupiter. You see Io, Europa, Ganymede. Ganymede is has its own magnetic field. It's the only planetoid or moon in the entire solar system that also has a magnetic field the way that Jupiter does. Now, Jupiter has its auroras, telling you that it has a magnetic field, and these auroras are controlled by these moons, they say, if you study about it. It also has rings, but it's a finer dust particles than Saturn, but it's from the many collisions, and like I said, we've got over 60 known moons, but there's millions of these tiny, small pieces, and it's the indicator of the destroyer and what has happened before. This is its magnetosphere, or the shields of its planet, just the same way the Earth has them. It has them, and it reaches out, and it's just like the sun. It is, some people will call it a pulsar, not just a fail star, but a pulsar. Now it has its own radiation field, as you can see in these graphics. But with any disruption that would cause the magnetic reversal between Jupiter or any planet, Saturn, with some of these giants behind our Earth, you could, through any of this dust particles, any of these 66 moons, into the asteroid belt, you would see why NASA now theorizes that Jupiter has done this before. It created the moon. It created the asteroid belt. That's why the ancients called Jupiter Nibiru. Look through the other videos. Look at the timestamp here. We're going to see, as we get into next year, we're going back into March again, you're going to see Venus, the Earth, Mercury, and Jupiter line up again. It will be interesting at that point to watch the magnetopoles. It'd be very interesting indeed to see what happens at that point. That's April 10th, 2017. Now, I'm not saying any days because it would take days for this to line up. Not a date setter because God says no one knows that day. But guys, 12,000 years ago, and I think I can prove it, something happened very similar to what we're talking about. And I think that was the last written legend that we know of about what was called Nibiru. Very important. 12,000 years ago is when I also think that the flood of Noah happened. The reason I say that is because, guys, you had the first 6 days, you had the day of rest. But if you read the Bible, one day with man is 1,000 years with our Lord. And that would make very logical sense that it took 1,000 years per phase of what we went through in Genesis. You understand what I'm saying? And then we've had another 6,000 years or so since that point. And 12,000 years ago, something happened on this planet that's very well documented. I've documented it in videos before. I'll briefly touch on it here. But notice at the very bottom line of this, and you can read it, it says strong currents in the magnetosphere generate permanent aurora around the planet's poles and intense variable radio emissions. They were picking these up even in 1950. But they say that, which means that Jupiter can be thought of as a very weak radio pulsar. Think about that. It's the electromagnetic spectrum has been seen in the infrared, visible, ultraviolet, and soft X-rays, and it's like wings going out both sides of it, just like a couple of the images that I was showing you. Guys, there's important information about this, and again, I know a lot of people, it's just so far-fetched that it's not quite grasping it, and some people are just afraid of it because it blows their solar flare cell phone camera theory away. But this is Jupiter. This is graphics of what the magnetic field would look like, very similar to our planet. Now, it varies a little differently because of the way the moons are. It has many more moons. We have one, and it has many more. This is Callisto, on the one of the larger moons, the 9th largest object in the solar system. It has its own magnetic field. To me, because of that magnetic field interacting with the magnetic field of Jupiter, that would be the main pinball if you had something change. And you just saw evidence of that magnetosphere change. It wasn't just one model. The Japanese models picked that up too. But when you start talking about something coming into the asteroid belt, it means chaos, and that has a lot to do with the name of the planet. Guys, you're not looking at the solar scape. You're looking at Robeson County, North Carolina, and something that happened 12,000 years ago, except there's thousands of these craters. There's a history behind this. It happened at the time the woolly mammoth became extinct. There were people that were Native American, Indians at that time, that survived it, and it happened at the time of the Great Flood, 12,000 or so years. It's a heads up. I will cover that in detail in part 5. Be safe.